So, my name is Łukasz Hacura. I worked in game development 17 years this year. I'm currently a CEO of Anshar Studios and head of studio, but I used to work as a producer. I started in the industry as a programmer, and I worked on many different and varied titles, but most of them were premium PC and console games. And Anshar Studios is a company that is celebrating at Digital Dragons its 10 years anniversary. Currently, we're hiring over 160 people, and right now we're mostly doing AA premium PC and console games and have over 20 titles in our portfolio. So what's the idea of this talk? The agenda for this talk is that I will first explain why am I doing a talk with such a strange title. I will recap the previous talk that I did 6 years ago that I thought that I knew something here at Digital Dragons that was called From Indie to a Sustainable Company. So now I'm doing from a sustainable company to apparently unsustainable AA development, which was unintentional pun. So I will recap if did I change my mind about any points that I did those 6 years ago. And then obviously those 6 years gave me a lot of new experiences that I want to share with you. And hopefully we're going to squeeze some time for the Q&A, but there's a lot of stuff to cover for 10 years. So the idea of this talk is that by conveying my thoughts and experiences that some say made me bitter in the industry, hopefully you can reflect on them, or maybe imitate some of them, and not learn them the hard way. So that's the general idea. I will be talking about things that are most applicable to founders, CEOs, managers, top managers, lead producers, executive producers, etc. Some of them will be useful for everybody that does video games, but it's mostly for people who are trying to organize other people that are making video games. So to recap my previous talk, I said that I honestly believe that you should gain some experience before you start a studio, and 100% that's still a thing. You need to learn a lot of new things when you're starting to run a studio, and game development, as you all know, is super complicated on its own. So if you combine those two things at the same time, that you need to learn how to make games, you need to learn how to make a studio, that's from my experience, that is a bad mix. Why not use somebody else's money, for a couple of years to earn that experience the hard way, not losing any money in the process. Another thing is finding the right partner. A crucial thing. Finding the right partner is like finding the right partner for a spouse, for example. Although you're probably going to spend more time with your business partner than with your spouse. So this is a super crucial thing. I was very lucky to co-found a company with my best friend. Then Gregory joined soon after as a business angel and was co-running the company with me for the last 10 years. I was super fortunate of that. My wife actually, so I do spend a lot of time with my spouse. My wife actually helped throughout those 10 years, and she recently joined us also as an employee. So thinking about, it should not be like, oh, I have a nice roommate in college. Let's start a company together because we have a great idea, right? If there is no character fit, it might be super hard. That was Gregory, by the way. Second thing is making connections. It seems kind of obvious, right? You need to make connections in this industry, in any industry actually. But usually when people say making connections, they're thinking about you need to have a pool of people that you can hire from, and you can need a pool of people to do efficient biz dev, right? And to have your ear to the ground what is happening out there. When the years go by, I actually see it more also as a peer network of people that you can ask for advice that have many vast different experiences that you have, and it's super important. Like, for example, at the conferences like this, those exchanges of this experience are super valuable. This is a photo of actually a conference that we organized at Anshar Studios a couple of years back called Game Design Summit for that particular reason, because we wanted people to exchange ideas about game design and expand our network in that regard. Cash flow is king. I don't know if you heard any of my other speeches throughout the years, but I tell it almost on every of my speech, and I will continue to say it. Companies do not go bankrupt because they have low valuation on the stock market. They go bankrupt because they don't have money. Actually, it's not Gandhi. That's Gregory who's always saying that, but it's a nice meme. Finding the right investor. I don't treat Gregory as an investor anymore. I mean, he joined a couple months in after forming the company, and we incorporated the company together with Gregory, so changed the legal status. So right now he's like a co-founder for the last 10 years, right? But throughout those years, especially in the recent years with the M&As, with everybody in Poland going to the stock exchange, etc., there is a big discussion about that finding the right investor is similar to finding the right partner, in a sense that it will change your company. Be it a minority stake, like, I don't know, 11-bit studios investing in Full Steer, for example, right? Or being a total acquisition, like Embracer acquiring Flying Wild Hog under PlayOn, right? Or going to stock exchange. This will change your company, this will change the way you operate, and you need to really think about it hard. Do you want to do it? How you want to do it? With whom you want to do it? For example, we were thinking for a couple of years of going public on a stock exchange, but then the mess that we're in right now, if you didn't notice, we are in a mess right now, happened. So those plans changed. You can efficiently do it only once. I know that there are a lot of people out there who are like, oh, one investor, second investor, third emission, fourth emission, fifth emission, right? But efficiently, you can do it only once, right? So think about it really hard. Fail faster. Now, there's this idea about startups in general in Silicon Valley. Like, embrace failure. Failure is good. We should all fail. and this will magically make us better. And in game design, there's the same thing, right? Fail fast, follow the fun. Now, while it is true, and I do think it's true only with a second component added to it, that you're actually actively and intentionally learning from failure. Because if you're not doing that, then you're just failing. And so the way you, I don't know, organize your postmortems, how you gather feedback after the project, how you approach a failure of launching your game, for example. Did you learn something from it, etc.? Because if you did not fail, it's just failing for the sake of failing. And I think that message sometimes gets lost in translation. 6 years ago, I had a nice anecdote about how we needed another bank because we lost credit in the first bank unexpectedly, but now I have a new great anecdote about the fact that, yeah, you definitely should have a second bank. Think what would happen to Huge if they had only one bank, for example. So I still stand by that. People are everything is a kind of a cliche, you might say, or even cheesy line, like, yeah, people are everything. But even if you look at it at the heartless way possible, like from the capitalist valuation point of view, your company is worth close to nothing without people, right? You can have $100 million or $200 million or $1 billion worth of a company, although usually those $1 billion IPs are worth also something in those. But besides IPs, if you take out people from the equation, you have what? Office space, computers, software. Like, this is worth thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's near zero, right? So without people, you're worth basically nothing, because only the fact that you can generate a video game basically using those people, that's the only value you have as a video game company. So we're not like, I don't know, like a shipyard that has infrastructure that is worth a lot. So you need to be mindful of that. That's where your value lie as a company. There's a great talk by Jesse Shell, Game Studio Leadership. You can do it. It's a pretty old talk, but it's still very accurate. One of the best talks, and much better than the talk that I'm doing right now, about leadership and running a company. But actually, the fact that you need to realize that you will not make games anymore is a very important realization when you're running a company. And I know that there are CEOs out there that are refusing to accept that reality, you know, like creative director, C/CEO, etc. I know that there are people who think that it works, and I don't want to dunk on them, but I do. Uh, the thing is that you're doing something wrong, right? You're either a bad CEO or a bad creative director. You cannot do both at the same time and be really good at it. And there are obviously, you know, like people who are saying that I'm a creative CEO and I have a COO, but in reality, basically your COO is the CEO, right? It's just nomenclature. Adapt, I'm not going to dwell on this one because this one actually changed a lot. So I have an Adapt 2.0 after 6 years. And pivot is a code word. Free fast money changes your company. That's absolutely true. I was talking about research and development funds, like a government funds or European Union funds. But whatever money, whatever huge injection of cash into your company that you are required to spend fast will change the DNA of your company. And not necessarily in a good way. You need to understand that you're going to build processes and pipelines and, for example, scale up your company based on that injection, and then you need to sustain it after the money is gone. And the second part is eludes some people, right? And then you have other companies that are continue to do research and development and for government money, and they are not focusing on their core business, which is making video games, or they don't do that and they find themselves in a position that they don't have a positive cash flow. And as we know, cash flow is king. Having a mission, so having something that you can show that there is a reason that if you come to this company, you're going to do certain things. There's a strategy in place. There's a mission in place. The company has certain values from which you can decide who you want to hire, and somebody can decide that if they want to join your company. Something besides, you know, the fact that you pay them money. And it's very helpful on retention, on your recruitment, and on. It's like a game that you game design and you have your design pillars, right? If you don't have a good creative direction of a video game, the game is inconsistent and you can feel it. The same thing is with the company. So 100% you should have a mission. We actually had it very late in our development. I mean after 4 years, because this is when I gave this talk 6 years ago. But sometimes you don't know what you want to do from day one, or you're not able to because of the economical situation. And the last thing that I said is that you're playing an infinite game. I also have a 2.0 slide on that one, so I won't dwell. This is just a Matthew McConaughey receiving his Oscar and saying that his hero is him in 10 years, and that rings something in the infinite game. But I will touch upon that later. Yay, less than 15 minutes. Good, good. We have good tempo. New talking points. Get your shit together. That's that's the biggest one, I think. The biggest change in my personal life in the recent years. Maybe children had something to do with it, that I needed to reorganize my life. But what you need to understand that you will never, ever be up to date. This is impossible. You cannot dig yourself out of the hole of things that you're required to do. And you need to accept that. Because if you go into your work life, like with this attitude, I'm gonna have this under control, I'm gonna like get ahead of the tasks, this is impossible and it will burn you out. So the only thing that you control is the pace and quality of the work output, of your work output, right? And when you realize that, you realize that you need to optimize yourself as a part of optimizing your company so that you're not a bottleneck. And there are a lot of CEOs out there. I'm also more often than not, I'm guilty of that sin, right? That are bottlenecks in either decision making or whatever it else that you're bottlenecking your company, and how you organize stuff, how you handle your calendar, process your task, assign the task, how you delegate, which also is hard for some people. This is super important, right? So there's this whole movement about getting things done, right? GDT. That actually I love, and it's and I could do a separate talk just on this topic, but basically it's amazing what you can do with your productivity in the same amount of time when you realize some things. Build a learning routine. So let it not all be bitter experience learning, right? So there are ways to learn besides experiencing the failure. You can, whatever works for you, right? Listen to podcasts, read books, listen to books on audiobooks, go to conferences like this to listen to other people, talk to other people, building a peer network. And this is actually for everybody. You're a programmer, you're a producer, whoever you are, you should be actively seeking to build a network around you of your peers, of people that know your craft, that you can call, that you can ask for advice, that they know that they can call you and ask for advice. And this is like super useful to know that sometimes there's not a lot of you in your specialization in the company. Like, for example, I have only one CEO at the company, right? But maybe there's not enough producers, or maybe there's not enough VFX artists in your company to learn from. But you need to build the network around yourself. There's a shitload of resources on productivity online. Again, many speeches have been done about it. I personally strongly recommend reading Getting Things Done, or anything that is remotely connected to that philosophy of getting things done. But as I said, there's a lot of things out there. Next one, develop the company, not only the team. So this is actually a little bit counterintuitive to the fact that I said, hey, people are everything. But I strongly believe that what differentiates corporations, companies, from like small indie teams or teams basically, is the overheads, right? Is the infrastructure. And the bigger your are, the more that factors in, and it's not linear. If you're a 5-person team or 3-person team, maybe you don't have a dedicated QA, right? But you're gonna need it at some point. Maybe you don't have a dedicated IT department, you're gonna need it at some point. Maybe you don't have DevOps, UX, HR, whatever it is, there's a lot of things that go into making a company run smoothly, and the bigger you are, the more important that is. I gave a speech on it 2 years ago at GAC called Growth Pains, then wrote an article about it, how to scale a game dev company, so I'm not gonna just encourage you to look at it. There are a lot of challenges when you grow, and you need to handle your company differently. But I strongly believe that this is something that mostly differentiates indies from, like actual companies. Laser guide your biz dev. So this is something that I might be biased here, because after certain years you build connections and you approach biz dev differently and value your time differently, but you can because you know a lot of people. But I still believe that you should laser guide your biz dev and not go wide. You should focus on concrete things that you want to achieve in your business development, that you should know what you want to achieve, and not like meet everybody and meet to match, go on conferences, talk with everybody from a business development perspective, not knowing, friendly conversation, but from business development perspective, oh, maybe this will turn into a deal. No, it will not. Most probably it will not, right? So the thing is that if you're going wide, you're going to succeed, I don't know, 1 out of 100. That's actually a good statistic to have 1% success rate. If you have a good wide plan of approaching a concrete strategy, like for example, I want to push my game on Game Pass, right? Okay, who do I know at Microsoft? Who do I know that knows somebody at Microsoft? Who do I know who got this game on Game Pass, at which conference they're going to be, right? I'm going to attack it from 3, 5, 10 different angles, and I'm going to strategize my whole business strategy because my goal is to get my game on Game Pass. So there's first the goal, and then I'm creating the opportunity for BizDev. And from my statistic, I would say that suddenly you have 10% efficiency. I mean, obviously it's not like 10 to 1 because it takes more time to strategize those things. But again, I think it's more efficient. You should have a CRM tool actually for your BizDev to track your progress, to know what's going on, and to actually have data on it, not only gut feelings. And you need to be bold. You need to, like, the worst thing that can happen is that somebody can say no. That's like the worst thing. But you do have to have a thick skin because usually it's going to be no, right? Usually. Even if you do it super well, like I said, and super focused, it's probably 9 times out of 10 you're going to hear a no, or a polite American no. Okay, Adapt 2.0. Now, what changed during those 6 years is that I realized that there is a huge pivot cost when you change your strategy, when you adapt, but like adapt on a company level, that you're changing your whole strategy, right? So if it's possible, you should focus and try to stick on a mission and strategy as often as possible when you're making decision, because this will make you consistent, and this will make your processes and pipelines aligned and better year to year. And because if you're constantly changing your strategy, then you're like resetting the experience counter, the processes counter, the pipelines counter. On the other hand, you cannot stagnate, right? You always need to iterate on the methods and tools in order to achieve your current mission, strategy, or goals. And distinguishing those two things is sometimes tricky. Am I not making this because I want to be consistent, or I'm not making this and this means I'm stagnating, right? And Anshar had a lot of problems with that, right? We switched platforms that we're specialized in. We switched genres that we did as a company. We switched business models from body renting to co-dev, work for hire, full SKU dev, a lot of different business models that we worked in. We switched technologies. We used to be a Unity company, then we were a Unity and Unreal company. Now we're an Unreal company. And it's super frustrating knowing my cost structure when I have, experts at my company, seniors at my company, etc. And all they say is like, oh, we keep learning. We're doing this for the first time, right? Well, we don't know what we're doing, actually. And you're paying those people shitload of money, right? So it's super frustrating. But this is the problem. Because if you look at the Anshar Studio timeline, we start with mobile, then we did VR, that I thought I'm adapting. We did a lot of porting, remastering, shitload of money in that, but nobody wanted to do it. And now we're in a RPG and AA development era, right? And the thing is that if you compare, for example, this chart to Larian Studios' chart, who has been doing RPGs for the last 25 years, and they never did an RPG that sold less than 1 million units. Now that's consistency, right? So yeah, I strongly do believe you need to adapt, but I'll give you an example. Right now, like with my VR debacle a couple of years ago, right? Right now, for me, what's happening out there in the technology, let's say, sector, right? You have Web 3.0 and NFTs, like, not touching that shit, right? So that's one decision. Second, you have AI, and I'm like, okay, I'm 100% right now sure that, okay, we need to go that route. We need to embrace it. We need to enhance our pipelines using AI, right? So the question is, am I going to give a speech in 6 years that I was stupid or that I was right? I don't know. Am I adapting or stagnating, right? So I think right now that if you don't embrace AI, you're stagnating. But if I'm right, we'll see. And now we go with the big guns. I hope they don't take my game development membership after this, but nobody knows how to make games. And I have a manifesto actually prepared for that. It's if you're not creating a sequel or a clone with minimal changes, using the same team and tools, you're in uncharted territory as a game developer. facing potential failure and learning on the go. So this is the fact that you can have seniors and experts on the team and they have no freaking idea what they're doing, right? Because you change the technology, you change the genre, you change the whole context of the work, etc. There's a reason why Ubisoft is so good at making Assassin's Creed. And there is a reason why we hate that the Assassin's Creed are not vastly different from each other, right? Those things are super connected. And so now that we established, or I established, or I think you might disagree, that nobody knows how to make games, if they're original in any way, how do you minimize the damage, right? How do you do that? So first thing is design validation. And you can validate your design by many different tools, right? You can have a peer review. I'm circling back to that network of peers that you can, show the pitches to your fellow creative directors or senior designers in the companies that you know, show them prototypes of your build. We're a very open industry, actually, in that regard, right? Everybody will sign an NDA to see what you're cooking. So that's actually super easy. You can go public, right? Early access is like a big gun, also from a marketing perspective, not good for all projects, right? But betas, demos, however you can validate with real players online, that's also good. Right now, I'm a big fan of UXR and silent reviews. So we actually we're building UXR studio at department at Anshar Studios right now. So you can do it externally, use companies like Hit Detection or Agro Consulting. There are a lot of companies in Poland that are using Try Evidence. Or you can, as I said, do it internally, have your own UXR department that is doing playtests of your video game with proper analytics and service in place on real players that you should select for your game. And then they are preparing a treatment for your design team. It's like a design therapy for a game. And it's important that it should be it's never 100% objective, of course, but the UX researcher should not be part of the team, right? It's like we try to separate that, be as objective as possible, and just give this opinion on, hey, this is how probably the market will react, the players will react to your game, and this is the problems that we see. I think that we are actually in Poland, we're many years behind the leads in the industry in that regard. UXR is a relatively new thing in Polish game development. A lot of people are also treating it like, nobody will tell me I know what's best for a game, etc., etc. So, the designers need to embrace the fact that UXR is actually a scientific method, and arguing with that is kind of like arguing that the Earth is flat. But and I think we're gonna get there. Another thing is target audience validation. So, actually, an animator at my team at Anshar once told me that, and I love that quote, that if you're not sure who the target audience is, it means it's the designer. So, and that's actually 100% true. And again, I don't want to dunk on anybody, but I will. I know that there are a lot of CEOs and creative directors out there who are going to say, I know what the players want because I know I'm a player and I know what players want, right? So if I hear that, it's like, well, actually, you're kind of an idiot if you say that. Because you have no idea how many yous are out there, right? So what is your target audience persona? How many actually, what's the market size of you? I don't know, we know there's one, but depending on our budget, we maybe need 2 million of those, right? So, and you have examples all around the industry. I took a very good example, not to dunk too much, right? So I took a good game to show you an example, but there's a game called Midnight Suns, right? I spent 80 hours in that game. I love that game. It's a good game. Who is it for? I don't know. Is it a tactical game? Is it a card battler? Is it an RPG? Is it like a Persona-like RPG? I don't know. I honestly don't know. If somebody knows what's the genre of the game and they could tell me, that would be nice. But I don't know who was supposed to be the ideal target audience, so I think it was actually the creative director here, right? So, and obviously it was fairly well received. It has very positive on Steam, right? But it underperformed drastically compared to XCOM, right? Drastically, massively. Uh, hey, another example. You can always dunk on yourself, right? Game Deck. Again, fairly well received, right? Seven in front of the Metacritic. It's our first RPG, very positive on Steam. But it underperformed because we underestimated the number of people that would be interested in actually playing exactly this game, right? We underestimated it. It was made too niche. With all the problems that this game had, I strongly believe that if we would fix that problems, the difference in sales would be still, it would be not count 3 or count 5 or count 10. It would be like 30% better. Awesome. Still be shit. So yeah. And a lot of people then say, well, market analysis should be the publisher's job. Well, maybe it should, but it's yours. The fact is that when you're coming to the publisher, you already have a pitch or a prototype. You already decided 100 times who you are making the game for, right? It might be too late, or you might not listen into the publisher's feedback, or they might not care, whatever, but you should try to understand who are you making the game for. There's a lot of tools that you can use for it, like SteamDB, shitload of tools at Steam Labs. There are a lot of materials with Quantic Foundry. If you want to pay them, that's also super expensive. But this data is outdating super fast. So don't look never at analysis like 2 years ago, whatever. They don't matter, right, at all. You should look at only recent stuff. But thankfully, there was a very good speech on that on this year's GDC, made by Phil Hoffman from Humble Games, that actually did a very nice breakdown of different target audiences and let's say player tastes. And I encourage you to watch this. Budgeting one-on-one. So I took the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and the only thing I changed is that the velocity and the value of the particle I changed with the budget and the scope. That's the only thing I did. And it's 100% works. You cannot precisely measure both the scope and the budget at the same time. You just cannot, because one is dependent on the other. So if you come with a budget to the team, they're going to try to determine the scope. If you go with the scope of the team, they're going to try to determine the budget. But if you try to box down budget and scope, it's like it's falling apart, right? So you need to do like 100 of iterations back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, trying to catch this moment where it's almost accurate, but it cannot be ever accurate. First of all, buffer is a lie. So if you try to mitigate that by buffering your budgets, you know about the buffer, the team knows about the buffer, everybody knows about the buffer, and they will use it to make the game better. They will use it to adjust scope. They will not leave the buffer for the things that the buffers are for, right? Unforeseen things. No, it will be 100% used on scope, so on quality or size, and I've seen this a dozen times in my career. But impossible or not, you still need to approach it. Right? You need to still try to give it a crack at it, and because you're going to be asked by your clients or publishers or whoever, investors, what's the budget of the game, what's the scope of the game. So it's good if you have historical data that you can lean on with estimations, burn down charts, etc. So, all those people who say that feeling Jira is awful, well, yes, but it's actually super useful. Even if you don't see it in the moment, you're creating a data point in a stream of, let's say, big data, right? That can help us understand what our future projects will take and will cost. Implement financial controlling at your company. If you're asking me what is controlling, that's your first clue that something's not right? There's a lot of companies out there who have no idea what is their cost structure. It's like, hey, we have a surplus of cash on the bank account, which means it's good. but you don't know, how much programming costs, or how much art costs, or what is the exact percentage. Is there any founder here, or a CEO, or I don't want to call him out. Don't. But ask yourself this: do you know what is the percentage of overheads at your company? Like, is it 20%? Is it 10%? Is it 30%? If you don't know that, then you don't know your cost structure, right? For example, what are your overheads? People don't know. People guesstimate. Um, Obviously, you cannot just ask the team what is the budget, what is the budget based on scope or whatever, because you're gonna get. It usually looks like this. Hey, this is the budget for the game. Uh, Estimate me the scope. You get the scope. The scope is obviously shit because they added like hundreds of buffers into it, etc. So the scope is like this. Yeah, we can do this for $10 million. And you're like, yeah, well, publisher would not like that. So maybe let's try doing this. And then you're going back to the team with, oh, okay, this is the scope. Oh, this will cost $15 million. Oh, okay, so, and if you do it like 100 times, or if you did it a lot, you know your team, you know how you estimate, you have your previous data, then you can try to guesstimate your budget and your scope. And last but not least is publishing. Again, I don't want to dunk on anyone, but I will. Most publishers out there do one-size-fits-all publishing, and it's inevitable. If you have a publisher that has a big portfolio and is launching like 5 to 10 titles a year, they cannot have an individual approach to your project, right? It's impossible. So they're doing all the same things that they were doing. Usually they're like a year outdated to the current, let's say, marketing and publishing trends. And I'm not going to give you examples because this will be on YouTube, and I work with publishers. But the thing is that you know the examples out there, right? From the half last year, you know that there are big names out there connected to like total flops. And why? Why did it happen? Well, Pavel Lecki from Excel coined this, that it's publishing catch-22. So a publisher knows that the project is not going to perform well, so they're not marketing it, so it doesn't perform well, right? And it's catch-22. And you see it all the time. So actually publishing is super hard work of 1,000 little things that add up to your success. Again, you can make a really good and excessive talk just about that. Thankfully, somebody did. So I encourage you to watch Marketing Engineering by Pavel Lecki from Exor Studios, how they approach Riftbreaker. And I honestly believe that if you watch this, this is the modern way you should approach publishing. It's probably in a year it's going to be outdated, by the way, right? Because it's all changed, tools change, shops change, new revenue streams come up, etc. But publishing is not about this one thing. It's not about, hey, just have a good game, or have a good trailer, or be on Xbox Showcase, or have a Game Pass. It's not that. It's a snowball effect, thousands of small things that you're doing. And honestly, big publishers are never going to do 1,000 things for your video game, right? So either sign a small publisher, like, I don't know, Anshar Publishing, for example, and be wary if they're getting big, right? If they're starting signing a lot of projects. Like, there are good publishers out there, but there's not many of them. And to finish, play the Infinite Game 2.0. So what it means to play the infinite game. So you need to realize that where you're running a company, your job is not to be the best or number one, or beating your competition. And with all the layoffs that are happening right now, with all that is happening in the market right now, it actually rings super true. Your job is to have enough resources to stay in the game and outlive your competition and keep improving yourself, right? So you're actually in the competition with your past self. Am I improving every year? And is the trend positive? There's a very good talk on Simon Sinek about it, The Infinite Game. Don't read the book. The book is like, it's okay, but he says everything in this 20-minute video. And there are a lot of books on good project management, on good company management, the 3 best books that I read in the recent years about it. It's Radical Candor, No Rules, and Nine Lies About Work. I think they're really good. And the best book I read in recent years on that's actually strictly about producing video games is Play for Production Process by a lead designer from Naughty Dog. That company doesn't have producers, by the way, or didn't have. Now they do. And he wrote the best book on production. That's how life works. So okay. But my biggest takeaway, right, from the last 10 years is that it was not all sunshine and rainbows, and I'm loving the outcome. I'm loving the fact that every year we were a better company than we were the last year, and I strongly believe that in the next 10 years we're going to be even better. But it's sometimes when you're running a company, it's super easy to be overwhelmed. And now I wanted to just share one quote with you that was super impactful for me, and it's from a movie, so it's not Seneca or Confucius, but but this quote actually got me through some hardest times in my professional career. So at one point, everything's gonna go south on you, right? Everything's gonna go south on you, and I'm sorry, I'm choking. And you're gonna think that this is it. This is how I end. And you can either accept that, or you can get to work. You just begin. You just do the math. You solve one problem, and you solve another. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home, right? If you solve enough problems, then your company gets to live another year, and you need to come to Digital Dragons and give a speech and showcase some cool stuff that you've done over the recent years. So yeah, that was it. Thank you. We're hiring, by the way, if anybody interested. And thank you. Oh, okay. I think we have a microphone. Awesome.
Thank you very much. This is a very needed conversation for founders and CEOs. And I want to know, based on your experience, as you grow, the problems that we have is that for several years we were a small company, and in the last 2 years we grew big and fast, like from 5 to 60 people. And it was very hard to manage. But we are doing quite well, but the problem that we have is the older developers that want from the startup time, from the founding time.
Yeah.
They don't adapt to the new way of work because we have a big office. We have guards in the entrance. We have times to have lunch because else it's a disorder. And they don't like that. And we have discussions about just let them go and bring new people who adapt to the new company, or try to explain them why we have to do such things. But sometimes they just don't understand.
Yeah, I mean it's a super common problem. So you're definitely not alone with it. I mean, I'm still fortunate enough to work with a lot of people that were at Anshar since beginning. Right, like my current head of design was like the first employee we hired, and he's still working at the company. But the thing is that however you love those people, right? I mean, obviously you need to give them time to adapt. Obviously you need to talk to them. Obviously you need to explain that. What are the reasons behind it? And hopefully you have good reasons for, I don't know, having a guards in the front door, for example, right? But if you're explaining that and they still cannot accept that, this is something that I often say is that there is not one person at the company who can stand and stop progress of the company, right? And sometimes you just need to let someone like that go, and maybe somebody was really good at working at a certain culture, at a certain company size, and just can't find himself at a certain size. And there are people who like can't work in a small company. So it's not necessarily even your or that person's fault, right? It's just you changed, and the circumstances have changed. So I always ask myself, if you would hire, if you had an opening for that position right now, would you hire that person again, right? Or knowing everything that you know about that person, or if that person would try to leave right now, how hard would you fight for that person to stay? Because if you kind of feel that, oh, that I'll actually be relieved, then you need to let that person go. So that's my
Thank you.
answer. Anya?
First of all, shameless quote stealer. I won't forget this one because you grabbed this one for yourself, and now I'm screwed. But the question I want to ask you is about the audience validation that
Yeah.
you mentioned. So you said that it's obvious that we should know who is the audience, like who.
And what's the size of the target
What's the
audience?
size of the
Yeah.
audience? Who's the audience? And isn't it similar to that we should know what the game design or the scope or the core game loop should be? Because you have an initial idea, and then the ideation process and iteration process comes in, and in many cases, all your initial ideas kind of goes down the drain. So I wonder if you had to put knowing who your audience is on a timeline, where would it be? Would it be alongside knowing your, I don't know, scope, the core loop or whatever that is? And if so, or if not, what would you try to adjust in the first place? So would you tailor your audience to your idea, or would you be willing to, tailor your idea to a well-known audience that you
Yeah,
might
so I don't think there's a silver bullet to that, but I can say how I would approach it. So definitely all that needs to happen in using the playful production process nomenclature, where you have ideation, pre-production. Well, pre-production is where you're actually preparing yourself to produce something, but you already know what it is. And then you have production, you have post-production, and you have your release. Yeah, there's a post-production that is before release. This is when the magic happens, the Metacritic, the quality happens. So using that nomenclature, it should all happen in the ideation, right? Be it in the beginning, and I will come back to that, or the end. But in pre-production, it needs to be solid, right? This is our target audience. This is what we're doing, because right now we're actually building tools and pipelines to actually produce a very solid thing, a concrete thing that hopefully is not going to change much. But in the ideation process, I think that we should start thinking about target audience immediately after we have a good idea. Not necessarily the other way around, because the other way around, I think, is it rings untrue. I don't want to sound like all artsy-fartsy, right? But I think that the spark should be there first, like, hey, I have this idea for the game, and then I'm trying to validate if anybody else wants to play that, right? And every time you drastically change your design, that you suspect that, hey, leans over to a different genre or to a different target audience group, etc., you should just simply repeat the process. Okay, this game is cool, we iterated on it, but let's check if it's still cool for enough people for our budget, right? Because maybe the budget needs to be cut, or maybe we need to adjust something. So every time you do it in the ideation process, you should basically redo your target audience validation, right? To make sure that you're still making a game for enough people out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, great talk. In your growth from 0 to 160, at what point in the growth was the most painful and why?
Oh, that's a very good question, because there were so many of them. So many painful processes. I think there were actually two. So one I know very well because it's past us. The second one is right now. So one I think was around between 50 and 80. and the other one is right now, when it's let's say over 150. So that initial between 50 and 80, what was the most painful is that suddenly you are losing your direct connection to your specialists as a CEO. Because when you have 50 people, you can still be very much hands-on in direct conversation. I mean, you're not probably not programming the game or whatever, you're not the specialist, but you can talk to every specialist, right? And suddenly you need to give up a lot of control, and you need to, and your leads become top managers. And the question is, are they prepared to become top management, right? Do you have people that are actually director materials? Because suddenly you're mostly interacted with your directors, maybe with your leads, right? But you're stopped interacting with your specialists. And this was very hard for me. We were not prepared. We did it messy. I think we came out, let's say, on top of that. I mean, we're still here, so we did, right? And played the Infinite game. But I think that that was super hard. So thinking earlier about installing your top management, because you're going to lose the connection to the specialist at one point. And right now, the biggest problem I think we have in terms of that we're making, but this is not actually a company size, but a project size switch, where suddenly we used to do 20, 30 people video games. Now we're doing, like, our biggest one right now is 80. And that switch, that suddenly it's not the team that is making a video game, but a couple of teams, right? Like a combat team, like a level team, UX team, or whatever. And this is a drastically different way of approaching production. And it's a big, again, loss on communication. There's a mess, this whole, we're not using like Agile, but let's say using Agile nomenclature. I mean, we use Agile, but we're not using Scrum. But using Scrum nomenclature, you have the Scrum of Scrums, right? And I think that that's another leap, and that's very hard from the production perspective.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Or are we all hot and tired? We're all hot and tired. Awesome. Thank you very much.